You question my tail's importance again, and I will show you exactly why that would be a mistake. Kale nearly dropped the scorched length of wire he was holding. He'd been tinkering with the atmospheric regulator for hours, the dull hum of the wrecked cargo ship's failing systems droning in his ears, and he had almost forgotten how close Nayari stood behind him. She was tall and slender, but there was a coiled tension in her presence, an ever-watchful alertness that told him she could spring into action if he took one wrong step. He turned slowly, hands stained with engine grease, sweat beading on his brow from the stifling heat in this cramped corner of the derelict vessel. He found her face just inches from his. Her eyes, luminescent in shifting shades of amethyst and electric blue, were narrowed in challenge, and the glowing threads of alien markings that traced over her temples pulsed in a rhythm he was starting to recognize as irritation or amusement, maybe both. "I'm not questioning it," he said, voice hoarse. "I just wasn't aware your species placed so much emphasis on tail maintenance." Nayari inclined her head, dark hair sliding across her bare shoulders. Her attire was minimal, patched together from survival gear that Kale had scavenged. She carried herself like a warrior, even in rags. At her back, the appendage in question was long and sleek, covered in softly iridescent scales that glinted with her every breath. A small fin-like flare formed a crest at the end, and each ridge emanated subtle glows that matched the pulses coursing across her skin. "We consider them an extension of our emotional core," she said, as if that explained everything. "Physical inspection matters for trust building. Have you never shared a moment of contact that way?" Kale stared, ignoring the hammering of his own heart. Since their forced landing on this hostile moon 3 days ago, they'd had more pressing concerns than tail rituals. The hull had been compromised, oxygen was leaking, temperature controls failing. He'd spent every spare second patching systems. She'd spent her time scavenging for food and fuel. Together they'd barely slept, had barely spoken beyond demands and logistics. Her directness both flustered and intrigued him. "No," he admitted. "Humans don't have tails, or if we did, we lost them in our evolutionary past." She stepped closer, close enough that he could see the faint shimmer of perspiration along her collarbones. "You seem to speak from a place of ignorance." "I am," he said carefully. "I don't know your customs, or your reasons, but if you need me to inspect your tail, I'll do it." Nari's lips curved, not exactly a smile, more in acknowledgement. "No gloves," she said. "It must be flesh to flesh." Kale felt his face warm. I need both hands free for the regulator. We still have an hour before the system meltdown. Maybe we should wait until..." "I don't like waiting," she said, and the tip of her tail twitched, flicking a small arc of luminescent dust into the stale air. He gulped, then carefully set aside the wire coil and the battered toolkit. She watched his every move, her gaze never leaving him. His exhausted mind, half delirious from tension and lack of proper sleep, whirled with questions. Why was this so important? Why now? Was it purely cultural or something else? She reached for him first, sliding her fingers over his wrist. The warmth of her touch shocked him. Her kind radiated heat in a way that felt faintly unnatural, like a living furnace designed for survival on cold worlds. Slowly, she brought his hand toward the base of her spine, just where the tail extended from the curve of her lower back. He could feel the firm muscle under her scaled skin, feel her pulse flutter in a rapid tempo. "Don't be afraid," she murmured. "I'm not going to hurt you." Kale forced himself to breathe. "I'm not afraid, just trying to figure out what exactly we're doing here." She let out a low, throaty sound that reverberated through the silence. "Trust me, you'll understand soon." He kept his eyes on her face as he let his palm rest against the juncture where tail met body. It was simultaneously intimate and bizarre. He felt the movement of her muscle, the delicate shift of each scale. She drew closer, pressing them chest to chest, her breath mingling with his, her markings flaring bright enough to illuminate the tight corridor. The engine's quiet thrumming faded to the background as he traced the ridged lines down the length of her tail. She sighed, a purring sound rattling deep in her throat. That was the first time he'd heard it so clearly. The corners of her lips quirked upward, and she leaned in so that her cheek brushed his. "Your kind rely so much on sight," she whispered. "My kind rely on touch, scent, breath, temperature. Right now, your heart is racing, your skin is warmer than before. Everything about you says interest and confusion, mostly confusion, Kale managed, though he couldn't deny the spark of something shivering down his spine. What do we call that sound you're making? She chuckled, her tone darkly playful. We call it an attunement response. Your body is telling me it's safe. Safe for what? For whatever comes next. She held his gaze for a long moment, then stepped back, letting her tail slide free of his grip. The moment ended, leaving him painfully aware of how close to her he'd just been. She reached past him, picking up the toolkit with inhuman grace. Now, she said lightly, finish the regulator. I can't exactly show gratitude if you're passed out from lack of oxygen. He cleared his throat and turned back to the panel, though his body still buzzed with the remnants of that moment. Her presence lingered, an odd mixture of alien threat and unexpected softness. I'd work faster if you'd stop distracting me, he grumbled, reacquainting himself with the wiring. She arched a brow. I doubt that. You look more awake than you have in days. He didn't dignify that with a response, but the smallest part of him acknowledged she was right. He felt strangely alert, a keen sense of his own blood rushing, as if the tail inspection had awakened some primal piece of his mind he'd forgotten existed. He forced himself to focus on the repairs. If they couldn't stabilize the environment soon, they'd have far greater problems than unresolved tension. And though he'd never admit it aloud, the idea of losing consciousness in front of her was humiliating in its own right. He started untangling wires, chanting a mechanical sequence under his breath. Red to coupling 3, blue to negative node, bypass the green lead. She moved behind him, not too close now, but close enough that he sensed her presence. You do that often. Mutter your steps out loud. Keeps me organized. You must have done this sort of repair countless times. You could say that. I used to be an independent pilot, freelance, picking up odd jobs for salvage crews. Then, circumstances changed. Circumstances changed. Circumstances? He shrugged. Bad luck. Lost a partner, lost a ship. Ended up drifting at a station on the edge of lawless space. Took a job hauling cargo. Ended up here. She was quiet, as if weighing how to respond. I'm sorry for your losses. He snorted, though not unkindly. You don't have to be sorry. The galaxy's a harsh place. You either adapt, or you end up spaced. She let the silence stretch before speaking again. My people once believed the stars themselves thrived on conflict. That the more we fought, the brighter they shone. He paused in his work. Did you believe that? Once, before I left everything behind. He glanced over his shoulder. Why did you leave? She studied him, and for a moment, her glow softened. Because there was no choice. The one who ruled us demanded absolute obedience. I asked questions. I rebelled. The punishment was exile. Kale saw the flicker of pain behind her eyes. She tried to hide it, but it was there. He recognized the look of someone who'd lost a home. He turned back to the wire, swallowing the knot in his throat. I guess that makes us both adrift. He heard her steps approach again, felt that gentle, purring vibration building in her chest. Her hand brushed over his shoulder. We share a common language of survival. For my species, that is enough to establish a connection. He busied himself with tightening a coupling, ignoring the traitorous flutter in his chest. So that's what this is? Survival bonding? Could be, she teased softly. Or it could be that your stubbornness and your willingness to dive into danger amuse me. He tested the final wire, heard a faint chirp from the console as the regulator system blinked from red to orange. We're close, he murmured. Just need to calibrate the flow. Good. Then we can finally rest. He nodded. We have to, or we'll kill ourselves with exhaustion. I'll keep watch, she said. You rest. I only need short cycles. Right, he muttered, eyes flicking to the faint claw-like nails at her fingertips. Let me guess, you're not just tall and strong, you're also able to function on less sleep than humans. Yes, she said, almost pityingly. But I won't let you freeze. I promise. He exhaled, bracing against the console. It was battered, half-fried from the crash, but at least it was starting to show signs of life. He was too tired to argue about sleeping arrangements. The cold that seeped in through the hull was a growing problem. Though the ship had landed on a desert moon, its nights were brutally frigid. He'd noticed Nayari rarely shivered, though he couldn't tell if that was her physiology or her sheer force of will. Or maybe she had to hide weakness because of how she was raised. It's done, he said at last, flicking a switch. The regulator hummed to life, a rush of purified air cycling through the vents. The immediate atmosphere improved. He could breathe a little easier, and the metallic taste in his mouth receded. You should lie down, she pointed to a small corner where he'd set up a makeshift bedroll from scraps of insulation. I'll keep an eye on the readouts. Cale hesitated, but realized his limbs shook with fatigue. The moment he let go of the console, he swayed. She steadied him, her tail brushing over his hip with surprising gentleness. Thank you, he mumbled. He trudged over and practically collapsed onto the insulation. Wake me if there's trouble. I will. Her voice was soft, warm. Rest, Cale. He let his eyes drift shut, lulled by the steady thrum of the newly restored air system. In the darkness behind his eyelids, he recalled the sensation of her tail sliding under his touch, the hum of her chest as she purred. It stirred something within him that he didn't fully comprehend. Confusion, yes. Curiosity, absolutely. But also an ache he thought he'd buried long ago, the longing for closeness, for a bond that transcended convenience. He slipped into sleep thinking about that hum, about the way it made his pulse race, about how the faint glow of her markings had lit the corridor in a comforting, hypnotic rhythm. He dreamed of starlight and fleeting touches, of tail scales brushing his bare arm, of soft, heated breath against his cheek. And through it all, that gentle resonance like the low rumble of distant thunder, calling him to drift deeper. He could not tell how long he slept, but it must have been several hours, because when he woke, the corridor lights were brighter, and the heat within the ship felt more bearable. He rolled onto his side, blinking away the grogginess, and saw Nyari standing at the console, tail swaying behind her as she studied the readouts with intense concentration. The overhead lights cast a sheen on her scaled areas, highlighting the intricate patterns of her species' biology. She turned at his stirring, and her eyes lit in their shifting glow. You slept longer than expected. He sat up, rubbing a crick in his neck. Guess I needed it. How's the oxygen holding? Stable enough. We have a temporary fix, but we can't stay here forever. Another day or two at most. Right. He pushed to his feet, ignoring the ache in his muscles. Then we need to figure out how to get the rest of the ship's systems online or salvage enough to call for help. A distress beacon, maybe. Her tail flicked in a thoughtful gesture. We can try to repair the communications array. But we'll need to venture outside for the right parts. The hull's storage compartments are mostly in the stern, and that's fully exposed to the desert's scorching daylight. We can't survive out there unprotected for long. Cale rubbed his chin. We can wait until nightfall. The temperature drops drastically, but with the right gear, we'll manage. Nayari nodded and stepped away from the console. Agreed. Until then, we should gather whatever we can, see if anything in the mid-deck can be repurposed. She paused, gaze lingering on him. You look better rested. He shrugged. I feel better. Thanks for not letting me freeze to death. Or suffocate. Her lip quirked. It was in my best interest to keep you alive. You're the mechanic. I'm just the muscle. Muscle? He glanced at her, noticing how her lean arms and toned legs flexed beneath the patches of improvised clothing. She was definitely built for agility. I assume your people are strong. Does that mean you can carry me around if I collapse again? She smirked. Yes, but I'd rather you didn't make a habit of it. Humans weigh more than they look. He chuckled, but the sound felt alien on his lips. He hadn't laughed in a while. It felt good, even if it was short-lived. They spent the remaining daylight rummaging through compartments in the mid-deck. Most were jammed or damaged from the crash, but they managed to pry open a few. Cale found a battered toolkit with some potentially useful instruments. while Nayari discovered a half-shattered container of medical supplies. A few vials had survived intact, though they were in some script Kale couldn't read. She identified them by scent. "Healing salve," she said, sniffing one of the vials and checking its color. "My old clan used something similar. Might help with your bruises." "I'm fine," he muttered, but she poured a drop onto her finger, then reached for his forearm, where a deep contusion was blossoming. He hissed as she rubbed it in. The salve felt cool and tingly, and the pain lessened almost immediately. "Okay, maybe not so bad," he admitted. Her purr rumbled low. "You should trust me more often. Not everything about me is dangerous." She stepped back, but not before tracing the tip of her tail across the floor in a languid motion. He tried not to stare. For the rest of the afternoon, they moved in tandem through the corridors. He noticed how her luminous markings changed colors in response to stimuli. They flared bright when she found something useful, flickered softly when she was bored, and glowed steady whenever he came too close. More than once, she teased him about his curiosity. "You act like you've never met an alien," she said after catching him glancing at her tail for the third time in an hour. He coughed. "One that glows like a signpost in the dark." "Not exactly. I've seen a few other species around the galaxy, but never one like you." She seemed amused. "We call ourselves Mercy, but we're rare now, scattered, hunted sometimes." His gaze flicked to her face. "Why?" Her expression hardened. "Because my kind developed certain biological gifts. We adapt to environments, handle toxins, modify our luminescence. Some see us as threats, others see us as property. Either way, I ended up running." Kale felt a spark of anger on her behalf. "That's no way to live." "No, it isn't." She turned away, rummaging through debris. He didn't push the topic. They'd have time for deeper conversations if they both survived. Once the sun began to dip beyond the horizon, they prepared for the trek outside. Kale fashioned 2 sets of layered thermal wraps from the salvage, though it was a clumsy job. He handed one to her. She wrinkled her nose. "This is heavy. Better than frying in the desert. The nights might be cold, but the day still lingers in the sands. There's a risk of heat pockets." She huffed. "Fine, but if my tail gets trapped in this, you will answer for it." He forced down a grin. "I'll handle your tail with care, trust me." Her eyes glowed with mischief. "So you say." They stepped out through the cargo door into a landscape of rolling dunes, tinted a pale, ghostly blue under the setting sun. Winds whipped across them, sending plumes of sand swirling in the twilight. The ship's stern was just visible a couple 100 meters away, half buried in a slope. "There," Kale pointed. "We'll find the external comm panel, see if we can extract the transponder. Might be salvageable." Nari shielded her face from a gust of sand. "Lead on, human. I'll watch our rear." He trudged forward, boots sinking with each step. The scorching air clashed strangely with the cooling breeze that came from the eastern ridge, creating pockets of intense heat followed by almost frigid blasts. She followed, surprisingly light on her feet, tail raised for balance. Every so often he'd glance back, noticing how the faint glow of her markings made her appear like a ghostly figure trailing him. After a grueling slog, they reached the stern. The hull plating was twisted and bent, revealing the innards of the ship's frame. Kale found the panel for external communications near a shattered porthole partially embedded in the sand. He knelt, prying it open with a crowbar. Inside, the electronics were scorched, but the transponder core might still be intact. Nayari crouched beside him. "I'll lift the plate, you disconnect the lines." He nodded, and she applied leverage with both hands, and her tail, hooking it under a twisted support beam to gain extra force. The panel lifted with a groan, exposing a mess of wires. Kale rummaged carefully, cursing under his breath. "Looks like the main drive is shot, but the sub-relay might be fine." She didn't let go of the panel. "Hurry, it's heavier than it looks." He worked fast, unscrewing the module with a small power tool. Sweat dripped down his temple, despite the cooling night air. At last he wrested it free, holding up a battered metal cylinder. "Got it." She let the panel drop with a loud crash, sending a spray of sand into the air. "That's our lifeline?" If it works, Kale stood, wiping his forehead. I'll need to piece it together with a receiver. We can probably rig something inside to broadcast a short-range distress call. If we're lucky, someone might pick it up. Lucky, she echoed, scanning the dunes with narrowed eyes. Luck is fleeting. We should keep moving. They clambered over the wreckage, searching for anything else of value. Nairi found a sealed ration pack half buried in sand, which she passed to Kale. He discovered an intact coil of high-tensile cable that might be used for repairs or towing. All the while, the sky deepened into a velvet darkness, and the two moons rose overhead, painting silver edges on the dunes. With each step, Kale felt the weight of their isolation. On some level, he'd known they were alone on this forgotten rock, but seeing the vast emptiness under the twin moons drove it home. They were on their own. He glanced at Nari, noticing how her glow seemed brighter in the darkness. Without warning, she tensed, tail going rigid. Something's moving out there. He froze, scanning the horizon. At first he saw nothing but shifting sands. Then, a ripple near the crest of a dune. The shape was low to the ground, slithering. A chill inched up his spine. Great, he muttered. Desert serpents, maybe. Don't let it get close, she warned. They can strike fast. They edged around the wreck, trying to keep distance from the creature, but the dune parted, and a hideous form emerged, elongated, segmented like an insect, with a pointed maw that glistened under moonlight. Kale cursed. That's not a serpent. The thing let out a shrill hiss, scuttling sideways before lunging forward. Nayari shoved Kale aside and sprang into action. Her tail lashed, and she drew a jagged piece of scrap metal from her makeshift belt. The beast reared up, trying to wrap around her legs. She slashed downward, cutting into its chitinous shell. It screeched. Kale stumbled but recovered, fumbling for a metal rod he'd found earlier. He slammed it across the creature's back, distracting it momentarily. Nari seized the opening, driving her improvised blade into a gap in its shell. A spurt of foul-smelling fluid erupted, and the creature convulsed, flailing in the sand. Her markings flared bright as she ripped the blade free, breathing hard. The beast gave one final twitch and lay still. Kale's heart hammered in his chest. What the hell was that thing? She tossed the blade aside with a disgusted grimace. A scavenger native to these sands, clearly drawn to the wreck or to us. It might not be alone. He wiped sweat from his brow. Then let's get what we can and go. We don't need more fights. She nodded. They hurried to gather any final scraps, then retraced their steps to the ship's main body. All the while, Kale kept glancing over his shoulder, half expecting more of those creatures to swarm them. But the dunes remained quiet, save for the shifting wind. Back inside the battered cargo hold, they sealed the improvised hatch. Kale set down the transponder, exhaling in relief. We made it. Nairi shrugged out of the heavy thermal wrap, revealing the sheen of sweat on her shoulders and chest. The scraps she wore clung to her frame, and Kale tried not to stare as she stretched, rolling her neck. That was simpler than I expected, she said. Simpler? He barked a dry laugh. I nearly got my legs chewed off. She looked at him with a flicker of her luminous eyes. You were never in real danger. I had you. He swallowed, hearing the confidence under her words. Right, thanks for that. She inclined her head in acknowledgement. Now, let's see if this piece of junk can help us get off this moon. They worked side by side for several hours, removing panels, splicing wires, rigging a makeshift broadcast device from the battered transponder. Their hands brushed occasionally, a fleeting contact that seemed to spark an electric jolt through Kale's arms. He realized how much he'd come to rely on her presence, how her purring hum or quiet commentary eased his tension, even as it teased him. At one point she leaned over him to adjust a circuit, and her tail curled around his wrist. He felt the heat radiating from it, the subtle friction of scales. His breath hitched. She heard. She always heard. Her lips curved in that faint knowing smile, but she said nothing, just released him gently. When they finally managed to jerry-rig a bare-bones transmitter, Kale let out a triumphant whoop. We've got a signal, he said, reading the flickering display. Short range, but better than nothing. If any passing vessel is within a few light days, They might pick it up. Then we wait, she said. He sank against the wall, chest heaving from the adrenaline crash. I hate waiting. She laughed softly, a melodic sound that contrasted with the fierce image of her in battle. As do I. They stared at each other for a long moment in the flickering light. The closeness between them felt charged, a tension that had been building since she demanded her tail inspection. He remembered the feel of her scales, the warmth of her skin. She took a step closer, and he felt the heat of her body all over again. You're shaking, she said quietly. I'm just tired. And hungry, he added lamely. Her gaze dropped to his lips, then flicked back to his eyes. There's a ration pack we found. I can warm it up. He nodded. Sure, let's do that. She moved away, but her tail drifted across his torso in passing, sending a flutter of sensation through him. It was more than a casual brush. It was deliberate. He felt blood rush to his face. He tried to focus on the next task. Perhaps he should double-check the life support readouts, but his mind kept returning to that moment of contact. She heated the ration pack over a small flame from the thruster's igniter coil, a precarious method but effective enough. Cale busied himself with adjusting a few connections on the transmitter, though he found little else to do but watch her from the corner of his eye. When the ration was ready, she tore it open, steam rising, and handed him the larger portion. We share, she said, sinking gracefully to sit beside him. He took a cautious bite. It tasted bland but edible. It's not exactly a banquet. She made a neutral sound. It's nourishment. Better than the scraps we had before. My sense of taste is different from yours. Anyway, how so? More attuned to minerals and proteins, less to sweets or bitterness. For me, this is passable. He chewed slowly, pondering how alien she truly was, not just in form but in every sense. Guess I'll have to find some new recipes if we ever get off this rock. She glanced at him. You speak as if you intend to keep feeding me. His face flushed. I mean, if we... She cut him off with a soft purr. I'm teasing. Despite himself, he grinned. Right, of course. They finished eating in a companionable silence, the only noise the faint crackle of the thruster's flame and the background hum of the air circulator. Afterward, Nayari rose and placed the remains of the ration pack aside, then hovered near him. He looked up questioningly. She brushed a hand over his hair, something she'd never done before. You've got sand in here, she murmured. Her fingers worked deftly, combing out a few grains. Cale froze, the gentle contact sending warmth coursing through him. Thanks, he managed. She said nothing, just continued, her nails lightly scraping his scalp. It felt far more intimate than it should have. His throat went dry and he let his eyes drift shut for a moment, absorbing the sensation. When she finished, she drew her hand away and the loss of contact felt sudden. I can't read your expressions as well as you can read my glow, she said softly. But I can sense something between us. He inhaled, forcing his eyes open. I won't deny it. There's something. Yeah. She tilted her head, luminous eyes searching his face. We might be rescued tomorrow or never. Would you live in regret if we didn't act on it? He swallowed hard. Her directness was bracing. What are you suggesting? She smirked, and her tail coiled near his ankles. That I might enjoy another inspection. He felt a flush spread across his cheeks. You're serious? Deadly so. She slid closer, her body angled toward him, the subtle glow of her skin dancing in the dim light. He could almost feel the rhythmic hum inside her chest. You're uncertain, I sense it, but also your heart is pounding again. He began, then took a breath. I've never been with someone so different. I'm not sure what the boundaries are. She lifted his hand, pressing his palm against the scaled ridges of her tail near her lower back. You already know the boundary. Ask, and I'll show you more or less. We're not so complicated. He dared to trace the scale lines, feeling them flex beneath his touch. Her purr intensified. I'm still wearing gloves, he noted, voice catching. Then remove them. She waited, unwavering. He complied, peeling them off, letting skin meet scale. The heat radiating from her body was intoxicating, a siren call in the gloom. She placed her palm over his chest, right where his heart thudded. You're not just a means to survive, Kale. Yeah. I need you to understand that, he exhaled shakily. I do. I hope you know. I'm not just curious about your physiology. She smirked. Liar. You are curious about every ridge and scale. Fine, he admitted softly, but there's more than that. Then show me, she murmured, leaning in to press her lips to his. It was a kiss full of unspoken longing, softer than he expected from someone so fierce. He eased into it, letting his free hand slide around her waist. She responded with a slight arch of her back, pressing closer. Her purr vibrated through him, making his pulse race. Their bodies fit awkwardly at first, each uncertain how best to hold the other. She guided his hand along her spine, pressing him to explore. He felt the rise of each scaled patch, the smooth skin in between. When his fingers brushed a sensitive spot near the base of her tail, she made a low, pleased growl and rewarded him with a deeper kiss. In that moment, he forgot the deserted moon, the crashed ship, the mortal danger. All that mattered was her heat against him, the swirl of color in her eyes, and the steady rise and fall of her breath. They pulled apart only when the need for air became too great. She rested her forehead against his, luminous markings flickering in a languid pattern of contentment. I want more, she whispered, but not if it scares you. I'm not scared, he whispered back, though the pounding of his heart betrayed a mix of nerves and exhilaration. Just overwhelmed. She smiled, teeth flashing. I won't push too hard. Yet. His breath caught at the promise in her tone. But then the transmitter bipped, a sharp sound that cut through the charged atmosphere. They both jerked, turning to look at the device. A faint light blinked on the display. Kale sprang to his feet, heart hammering for a completely different reason now. We have an incoming signal. Nyari followed, tail flicking with tension. Is it from a ship? Kale fiddled with the controls. A garbled burst of static hissed through the improvised speaker, then a faint voice. Distress! Crash site! Respond! The words were fragmented but unmistakable. Kale's eyes widened. Someone heard us. Nyari exhaled. We might be saved. A surge of relief flooded him. He pressed the transmit button. This is Kale, crashed on the surface. Do you read? There was a long crackle of static before a voice answered. Reading you, faintly. This is the salvage vessel Astra, preparing to jump into orbit. Stand by. Kale felt dizzy. He glanced at Nyari, whose expression was guarded. She was pleased, he could tell by the subtle glow, but there was also a flicker of wariness in her eyes. Salvage vessel, she repeated. They'll want to trade or demand compensation. Kale nodded. We have to be cautious. But if they can get us out of here, she set her jaw, stepping back. I'll let you handle communications. He turned back to the console, pressing the transmit button again. Copy, Astra. We're wounded, short on supplies. The ship's beyond repair. We request immediate rescue. Another crackle, then. Rescue might be possible. We'll need coordinates. Are you carrying cargo? Kale's lips thinned. Negative. This was a passenger transport, limited cargo. Another burst of static. Acknowledge, stand by for approach. We'll discuss terms. Kale eased off the console, meeting Nari's gaze. Terms, she repeated with distaste. Of course it's about profit. That's the nature of salvage crews, Kale muttered. But we might be able to negotiate. They won't want to leave us stranded if they came this far. She didn't look entirely convinced. Unless they think we're more trouble than we're worth. Then we'll make it worth their while. He took her hand, ignoring the spark of warmth that shot through him. You trust me? Her eyes narrowed thoughtfully. Enough to follow your lead. But if they try to harm you, they'll regret it. The deadly edge in her voice was a reminder of just how formidable she could be. He felt an odd comfort in that. "Understood," he said. "Let's prepare. We don't know what we're dealing with." While they waited for the Astra's next transmission, they hurried to gather their meager possessions. Tools, medical supplies, anything of value they could trade. Kale's mind buzzed with possibilities. If the Astra was friendly, this could be their way off. If not, they'd have to fight or flee. He wondered how Nyari would respond. Would she remain by his side, or would she vanish the moment she sensed danger? Something in him hoped she'd stay. When the salvage vessel's orbit stabilized, the transmissions became clearer. The pilot, who identified himself as Jareth, instructed them to mark their location with a flare. Nyari and Kale improvised a signal using a chunk of magnesium from the engine's housing, igniting it once they stepped outside at dusk. A brilliant flash lit the dunes, guiding the salvage shuttle as it descended through the thin atmosphere. The shuttle was a squat, boxy craft that kicked up a whirlwind of sand as it landed. Kale and Nyari shielded their faces, half-blinded by the swirling grit. Then the ramp hissed open, revealing 3 figures silhouetted by the shuttle's interior lights. Kale's stomach twisted with apprehension. He sensed Nyari bristle. They stepped forward cautiously. "Identify yourselves," a voice barked through an amplified helmet speaker. Kale raised his hands in a gesture of compliance. "I'm Kale. This is Nyori. We crashed here several days ago. We're unarmed." One of the figures snorted. "You'd be dead if you tried anything." "Let's see if you're worth the trouble." They strode down the ramp, weapons lowered but not stowed. Kale forced himself to remain calm. The lead figure, presumably Jareth, removed his helmet. He was a lanky man with a weathered face and calculating eyes. He gave Nyari a once-over, eyebrows lifting when he spotted her glowing markings and tail. "You're a rare one." Nyari's shoulders tensed, but she kept silent. Kale stepped in. "She's my crewmate. We need safe passage off this moon. We've got limited resources. We can trade salvage from the wreck." Jareth smirked. "We'll see what you have, then we'll talk about how much it'll cost to get you out of here." Kale nodded, swallowing the bitterness he felt. This was standard procedure for salvage crews in the fringe worlds. It still rankled him that their survival depended on someone else's sense of profit. They led Jareth and his 2 cohorts to the crashed ship. Nyari kept a careful distance, her posture rigid. Kale noticed how her tail flicked with each step, a sign of heightened alert. Inside, they showed the crew the compartments, the leftover tech, the battered but salvageable engine parts. Jareth's gaze kept drifting to Nyari. Kale could practically hear him calculating. "If you don't mind me asking," Jareth said to her at one point, "what's your species? Don't think I've seen your kind on the frontier." Nari's eyes glowed with caution. "We are called Mirsi." The salvage man nodded slowly, lips curling. "Heard rumors of your adaptability. Some folks pay big credits for that." Kale stiffened. "She's not for sale, if that's what you're implying." Jareth raised his hands, feigning innocence. "Just making conversation, friend. No offense." Kale forced a tight smile. "Right." They concluded the inspection, and the salvage crew seemed satisfied that there was enough valuable scrap to justify picking them up. Jareth named a price for rescue, a figure that made Kale wince, but it wasn't impossible, especially if he offered up the ship's coil drives or databanks. He swallowed his pride and agreed. "You can keep the entire cargo module," he said, signing over the worthless hull. "We just need a ride to the nearest station." Jareth shrugged. "Deal. But your alien friend better behave herself. We don't want trouble." Nyari bared her teeth in a cold approximation of a grin, but said nothing. Kale exhaled. "We appreciate your help." The next few hours were a flurry of movement as the salvage crew began cutting away parts of the wreck to haul aboard their vessel. Kale and Nyari retrieved their personal belongings, such as they were, and prepared to board the shuttle. He kept a watchful eye on the crew's every move, half expecting them to try something underhanded. But for now, they seemed content to do business. Finally, Jareth waved them over. "We'll stow you 2 in the passenger bay until we reach orbit. Don't wander." Kale nodded, ignoring the jibe. He and Nyari climbed the shuttle's ramp. The interior was cramped, cluttered with salvaged parts, sealed crates, and half-disassembled machinery. The passenger bay was little more than a bench bolted to the wall behind a cargo net. Home, sweet home, Kale muttered sarcastically. Nayari eyed the surroundings, tail curling. Better than freezing in the desert. He couldn't argue with that. The ramp hissed shut, and moments later the engines roared to life. They strapped in, the G-forces pressing them back as the shuttle clawed skyward. Kale felt relief wash over him. They were finally leaving that dusty graveyard of a moon. His body sagged, exhaustion setting in. Nayari placed a hand on his knee. He turned to see concern in her eyes. "You look spent." He gave a shaky laugh. "Guess I am." She leaned closer so only he could hear. "We'll rest soon." The warmth in her voice sent a pleasant shiver through him. The shuttle broke atmosphere, rattling violently before stabilizing into orbit. Jareth's voice crackled over the intercom. "We'll dock with the Astra in a few minutes. Once on board, keep out of restricted areas. We're going to the nearest trade station. That's your stop, yeah?" Kale pressed the comm button. "Yes, thank you." The ride smoothed out. Through a small porthole, Kale glimpsed the hulking shape of the salvage vessel drifting into view. A large industrial transport with external cranes and cargo pods. Not the most elegant craft, but it was their ticket off the frontier. The shuttle latched onto the docking bay, and a pressurized seal engaged. Kale unbuckled, bracing himself for whatever new challenges might await them on the salvage ship. Nayari rose as well, scanning her surroundings. "Stay close," she murmured. "I don't trust them." "Neither do I," he said quietly, "but we'll get off at the station. Then we'll be free." "Free to what?" she asked. He paused, uncertain. They'd never discussed a future beyond survival. "Free to go our separate ways, or not," he said, trying to sound casual. She regarded him for a moment, then simply nodded. A part of him ached at the notion of parting, but he couldn't assume she wanted more. They unsealed the hatch, stepping into the main cargo bay of the Astra. Jareth was waiting with a handheld console. "Follow me," he said tersely. He led them through a maze of corridors crowded with crates. The ship's interior smelled of stale air and lubricants. "Crew quarters are that way, but you're not crew, so you'll bunk near the storage hold. Don't wander." Kale stifled a groan as they reached a small compartment that reeked of unwashed linens and old machinery. 2 bunks were stacked against one wall, separated from a walkway by a flimsy curtain. "Cozy," Kale muttered. "Be grateful," Jareth snapped. "You're lucky we picked up your distress call at all. We'll be at the station in 3 days, assuming no complications. Try not to cause any." He walked off, leaving them in the dimly lit space. Nari tossed her meager pack onto one of the bunks, eyeing their new quarters with open disdain. "I've slept in worse places," she said, at last. Kale sank onto the lower bunk. "Likewise. At least it's not freezing." She nodded, but her eyes were distant. He waited, sensing her turmoil. "Are you worried about them?" he asked gently. She shrugged, tail flicking. "They look at me like I'm a specimen. It reminds me of places I've been before, places where my kind were treated like exotic creatures to be bought or sold." A surge of protectiveness rose in him. "They won't hurt you. I won't let them." Her expression softened. "I believe you. But you also can't fight an entire crew alone if they truly wanted to take me." He swallowed. "Then we'll be smart. We'll keep a low profile." She gave a small, humorless laugh. "Low profile, indeed." "Hard for me to hide." He watched the glow of her markings flicker uncertainly. "We'll manage." Over the next few hours, they settled in, enduring the suspicious glances from passing crew members. Kale ventured out only to find the galley, gathering some rations and water. Nayari stayed behind, refusing to endure the stares. When he returned, he found her perched on the edge of the bunk, absently running her fingers along her tail. She looked up, relief on her face. "You came back quickly." He sank beside her, offering a water pouch. "Didn't want to leave you alone too long." Her gaze flicked to the corridor. "I can handle myself." "I know. Still." She accepted the water, sipping carefully. Silence stretched between them. The hum of the ship's engines thrummed through the walls. He recalled the closeness they'd shared back on the planet, the kisses, the confessions, the electricity of each touch. Now, in this cramped bunk, overshadowed by potential threat, it felt as if a barrier had grown between them. She scooted closer. "Don't be so tense. I can practically taste your anxiety." He exhaled. "I'm sorry. It's just circumstances." She set aside the water and leaned in, brushing her lips over his cheek. "Then let's forget circumstances for a moment." He froze at the warmth of her breath against his skin, the whisper of scales as her tail looped around his calf. Her invitation was clear, and though caution lurked in the back of his mind, he couldn't deny the pull he felt toward her. "You're sure?" he asked softly. She fixed him with a level stare. "Absolutely." Their lips met in a slow, searching kiss, stoking embers that had smoldered since they'd left the desert. He let himself be guided by her hands and tail, by the press of her body. Her markings glowed in a deep violet hue, the color shifting with each breath. She nipped at his lower lip, teasing a soft groan from him. His pulse pounded, and he clutched at her waist. Then footsteps echoed in the corridor. They broke apart, breathing hard. She exhaled, eyes glittering with frustration. "Bad timing. We have to be careful," he murmured, glancing at the flimsy curtain that offered little privacy. She nodded, her tail unwinding from his leg. "Later, then." The footsteps passed by and the moment dissolved into awkward calm. Kale cleared his throat, adjusting his rumpled shirt. "We should rest. It's been a long couple of days." She gave a wry grin. "Agreed. But don't think you'll escape that easily next time." He chuckled, lying back on the bunk, looking forward to it. She lay beside him, and though there wasn't much space, they managed to fit. He felt her tail drape over his hip, a subtle reminder of her presence. He rested an arm around her shoulders, feeling the slow, steady purr that resonated within her chest. Sleep claimed them before long, lulled by the droning engines and the unexpected comfort of each other's warmth. When Kale awoke, the artificial lights had dimmed to simulate a night cycle. The ship's vibrations felt calmer, perhaps coasting in a standard trajectory. He noticed Nayari was already awake, sitting up and scanning the corridor. "Something wrong?" he asked. She shook her head. "No, just uneasy." I heard voices outside. Kale listened but heard only the faint hum of ventilation. "Probably just the crew. They work shifts." She frowned. "Let's see what they're up to." Cautiously, they slipped out of their bunk and ventured down the corridor. The ship's narrow passageways were lined with cargo compartments and sealed doors. Voices echoed from a larger bay up ahead. Peering around a corner, they saw Jareth and two others standing over a console, discussing charts of some sort. One of them muttered something about increasing the price and exotic cargo. Kale's gut twisted. He carefully leaned closer, trying to catch more details without giving themselves away. He managed to hear Jareth say, "I'm telling you, she's a mercy. People pay top credits for them. If we detour to the black market station at Delta Rim, we can sell her. The man is expendable." A chill of anger shot through Kale. He felt Navanger shot through Kale. He felt Nyari go rigid beside him, her tail lashing in silent rage. The other crewman said, "Is it worth the risk? Mercy can be dangerous." Jareth shrugged. "We have stunners, and if we keep her sedated, no problem." They laughed. Kale clenched his fists, heart pounding. So that was their plan, to pretend to help, then sell Minari into slavery. He felt a surge of protectiveness and fury. He glanced at Nari. Her markings flared in bright, angry pulses, but she kept silent, her posture coiled like a predator ready to strike. They inched back down the corridor before they could be spotted. Once out of earshot, Nari let out a low, trembling breath. "I knew it," she hissed. "I won't let them take you," Kale vowed. "We'll get out of here." She gritted her teeth. "They'll be watching for an escape. And we're in space, with no vessel of our own." He racked his brain for ideas. "We need to find a lifeboat or a shuttle, something we can use to slip away." She nodded, eyes fierce. "And if they corner us, we fight," Kale agreed grimly. We fight. They hurried back to their cramped bunk, trying to look inconspicuous. Kale recalled passing a small docking port on the way in, likely for the salvage crew's auxiliary crafts. If they could get there unnoticed, maybe they could steal a small runabout. Of course, that would require bypassing locks, dealing with patrolling crew members, and ensuring the craft had enough fuel. It was a risky plan. But what other choice did they have? They huddled close, whispering their strategy. We wait until the next shift change, Kale said. They'll rotate the guard in the cargo bay. That's our best chance to slip away. Nayari's tail twitched with agitation. Fine, but I can't stand these cramped walls any longer. Patience, he murmured, risking a comforting touch on her arm. She didn't pull away, though her muscles were taut. They waited, the minutes feeling like hours. Kale dozed lightly, half lost in thought about what might happen if they failed. Nari paced quietly, her steps nearly soundless. Finally, the overhead lights shifted to a brighter hue, signaling a change in the ship's cycle. They peered out and saw a pair of crew members trudge down the corridor, presumably heading to the mess or to their bunks. Jareth was nowhere in sight. Now, Nyari whispered. They slipped out, moving in the opposite direction. Kale led, recalling the path to the docking port. They passed a storage room, the door slightly ajar, but heard no one inside. Good. They rounded a bend, seeing a corridor that ended in a sealed hatch labeled Aux Bay. 2 crew members stood guard, rifles slung over shoulders, chatting idly. Kale's heart sank. They're guarding the bay, he breathed. Makes sense. Might be worried about us. Or intruders. Nairi's eyes narrowed. Then we create a distraction. Lure them away or take them out. He hesitated. Taking them out might be risky. They could alert the rest. What if we sabotage something? She mused. Cause a hull breach alarm in another section. He considered it. That might work. If we trigger the alarm near the engine room, everyone will rush there. We can slip in here and take a shuttle. She smirked, tail flicking. Let's do it. They backtracked to the engine compartment, a labyrinth of pipes and thrumming reactors. Kale found an emergency panel that would broadcast a hull breach alarm if tampered with. Carefully, he pried open the casing, rewired the circuit, and set the sensor to trip at the next coolant flush. This'll give us a 60-second window before the alarm goes off, he whispered, finishing the last connection. She nodded, eyes gleaming. We have to move fast. He flipped the switch. Go. They darted out, heading once more to the corridor leading to the auxiliary bay. He prayed the sabotage would work. 60 seconds ticked by in a blur of pounding footsteps and silent dread. Then a loud klaxon blared through the ship's corridors. Red lights flashed overhead. A frantic voice came over the comm. Hull breach in Section E. All personnel respond. The 2 guards at the Aux Bay cursed and took off running. Kale and Nairi pressed themselves against the wall, waiting until the guards vanished around the corner. Then they sprinted to the sealed hatch. Kale jammed a multi-tool into the lock, quickly bypassing the code with the same technique he'd used on the desert wreck. The door hissed open. Inside, a small utility shuttle rested on docking clamps, looking battered but serviceable. They rushed aboard, Nairi slamming the hatch behind them. Start it, she urged. Kale slid into the pilot's chair, powering the console. The readouts flickered. It's fueled enough for short-range flight. We can reach the nearest station or call for help. Do it, she said, scanning the rear cameras. I see movement outside. Kale typed in the launch command. The shuttle hummed, but an error beeped. Damn it, the docking clamps. I need to override them. He hammered at the console. Nayari growled as the camera feed showed Jareth and a few armed crew rushing into the bay. A metallic clang rang out. Someone was trying to manually keep them locked. Hurry, she hissed. Kale disabled the safety protocols, bypassed the clamp system, and the shuttle lurched, freeing itself with a jolt. The outer doors hissed. Hold on, he warned. He engaged the thrusters, ignoring the violent shudder as the small craft tore free from the salvage vessel. The external hatch parted, revealing the star-dappled void. They shot out into space, leaving the Astra behind, klaxons still screaming in its hull. Nayari let out a breath that sounded like a half-laugh, half-sob. We did it. Kale's hands shook on the controls. Not out of the woods yet. They might chase us. Jlan answered the sensors. I see no pursuit. Maybe the sabotage gave them bigger problems. He exhaled, relief flooding him. The shuttle's navigation system was rudimentary, but it showed the nearest station was 3 days away. He keyed in the course. We'll have to ration power, but we can make it. Nyeri stood behind him, placing her hands on his shoulders. Thank you, she said quietly. He turned in the seat, gazing up at her. I'm sorry I got you into that mess. If we'd never, she cut him off, with a soft kiss. We survived because of you. That's all that matters now. He closed his eyes, savoring the taste of her lips. A swirl of conflicting emotions welled up. Gratitude, relief, anger at Jareth's betrayal, and an undeniable yearning for the woman standing before him. She broke the kiss, breathing unsteadily. Let's set autopilot, see if we can figure out a place to rest in this tin can. Right, he murmured, punching in the autopilot function. The shuttle was cramped, essentially a cockpit, a narrow storage alcove, and a small sleeping berth behind a partition. They would have to make do. Once the course was set, Kale locked the controls and turned to find Nyeri leaning against the bulkhead, her markings pulsing with a subdued glow. We're safe for now, she said, but her voice still carried tension. Can you relax? He rose from the pilot's chair, crossing the small space. I'll try. She studied him, tail curling at her feet. Sit, she commanded gently, pointing to the edge of the makeshift berth. He did so, heart fluttering when she stepped between his knees. Her hands cradled his face, thumbs tracing the line of his jaw. We may only have this small moment, she said. Let's not waste it. Her tail wrapped around his waist, pulling him closer. He swallowed, nodding. There was a nervousness to his movements, overshadowed by the surge of desire building inside him. They had skirted danger at every turn, survived sabotage, a desert beast, and betrayal. Now, alone in the hush of a drifting shuttle, the weight of unspoken feelings pressed around them. She placed a warm palm on his chest, feeling the thud of his heart. You humans have hearts that beat so fast it's like a drum in my hand. He let out a shaky laugh. We're fragile compared to you, I guess. Her eyes softened. But you're resilient in other ways. You risked everything to protect me, to help me escape. I admire that. He caught her gaze, searching those luminous depths. I couldn't let them have you. The thought of you caged or sold off. He shook his head, anger flaring again. It makes me sick. She pressed her forehead to his. I once said we share a language of survival. But it's more than that now, isn't it? He closed his eyes, brushing his nose against hers. Yes, much more. Her breath hitched, and she captured his mouth in a slow, deliberate kiss that stole his air. He melted into it, letting the tension seep from his body as her warmth surrounded him. The hum of the shuttle's engines became a distant lullaby. Their hands roamed carefully, seeking familiarity in alien terrain. She traced the planes of his shoulders, the ridges of his collarbones. He explored the curve of her waist, the subtle texture of her scales. Her tail slid up his side, making him shiver. Every sensation was heightened by the knowledge of how close they'd come to losing this chance. When they finally pulled apart, he was breathless. We have 3 days until we reach the station, he said softly. Plenty of time. She smiled, a genuine, radiant expression that made her markings glow brighter. Plenty of time to discover more about each other. He nodded, voice husky. That's what I'm hoping for. They shifted onto the berth together, bodies molding in an improvised dance of exploration. Her purr reverberated through his chest, and he cupped her cheek, marveling at the contrast of smooth skin and scaled edges. She guided his hand back to her tail, encouraging him to stroke the sensitive ridges. He did so gently, eliciting a murmured moan from her parted lips. Heat flared between them, raw and urgent, yet there was tenderness, too, a delicate intimacy that transcended mere lust. Their kisses deepened, teeth grazing, tongues intertwining, the swirl of alien and human breath coalescing into a single heartbeat. She tugged at his shirt, pulling it over his head, her purr vibrating louder. He pressed kisses to her neck, tasting the salt of her skin, inhaling the faint, exotic scent that was entirely hers. Her tail wrapped him in an unspoken promise. Time became a blur in that cramped berth. They shed the layers of their makeshift clothing, letting flesh meet scale. Her luminous markings cast shifting patterns against the shuttle's metal walls, painting a moving tapestry of light and shadow. Their whispers filled the air, half-formed words of encouragement, gasps of pleasure, the sweet ache of discovery. She guided his hands in places he'd never thought to touch, teaching him the sensitive spots along her ribs, the fin-like edges along her thighs that glowed with each stroke. He showed her the warmth of human skin, the places that drew shivers from him when caressed just so. In that moment, they were neither alone nor lonely. They were two wanderers who'd forged a bond stronger than circumstance. Their breath mingled, hearts pounding in unison, until the tension built to an inescapable crescendo. It swept them over the edge of caution and into a realm of shared vulnerability. After, they lay entwined, bodies slick with sweat and the sweet residue of each other's breath. She rested her head on his chest and he stroked her hair, marveling at how natural it felt to hold her. The shuttle's engines hummed steadily, a lullaby in the darkness. Her purr subsided into a soft, sated rumble. Neither spoke for a long time. Eventually, he found his voice. "So," he said hoarsely, "that was incredible." She smiled against his skin. "Indeed. You learn quickly." He chuckled, exhaustion tugging at his eyelids. "You're an excellent teacher." Her tail draped over his leg. "I never expected this when we first crashed together," she murmured. "I was only thinking of survival." "Same here," he admitted. "But now?" She propped herself up, studying his face. "Now, we see where this takes us." He breathed out, relief and contentment mingling. "Wherever it is, I'm not running away." Her expression softened, and she leaned in for a gentle, lingering kiss. In that moment, the tension of the past days melted away, replaced by the quiet certainty that they faced the stars together. Over the next few days, they occupied themselves with more than just each other's bodies, though that discovery remained a constant source of mutual fascination. Kale spent time refining the shuttle's systems, ensuring they had fuel and life support to reach the station. Nayari helped by scanning for any potential hazards, using her heightened senses to pick up anomalies that the basic instruments might miss. Whenever they grew tired or bored, they found comfort in each other's presence. They shared stories. Kale spoke of the starports he'd visited, the odd jobs, the dream he once had of owning a real cargo hauler and charting his own routes. Nari in turn described the hidden enclaves of her people, the rituals of luminescence they performed under lunar eclipses, and the day she dared to question her clan's matriarch, leading to her exile. "I was proud and angry," she said softly. "I thought I could change the entire hierarchy. Instead, I was cast out." Kale squeezed her hand. "You're still here. You're still here. That counts for something." Now she gave him a small smile. "Perhaps. Now I wonder if I can find any remnants of my kin, scattered across the galaxy. Maybe I can rebuild, or at least preserve our culture." "If that's what you want, I'll help," he offered without hesitation, surprising even himself. Her tail brushed his ankle. "You'd do that for me?" "Of course. We're partners now, aren't we?" Her eyes shone and she kissed him in answer. By the time they neared the station, a frontier hub named Sola's Gate, Kale felt an odd mix of anticipation and dread. The station loomed in the viewport, an amalgam of metal and neon lights set against the blackness of space. Hundreds of ships of all sizes docked or departed in a steady flow of commerce and traffic. This was the place he'd once run from, a station on the edge of law and chaos, where deals were made in back alleys and fortunes were won or lost in a single day. They contacted station control, paying a docking fee with the small stash of credits Kale had left. Once approved, the shuttle navigated to a cramped berth in one of the lower tiers. "We're here," Kale announced, his throat dry. Nayari looked out the viewport, eyes narrowed. Crowded. Chaotic. "That's Sola's Gate," Kale said. "Stay close to me. People might stare, but we won't let anyone take advantage. We have to watch our backs." She squared her shoulders, adjusting her improvised clothing. I can handle stairs. Let them gawk. He respected her confidence. All right, then. Let's go see if we can find a better ship or at least some place to stay. The shuttle's hatch opened onto a bustling hangar where workers in grimy jumpsuits directed cargo and fueled vessels. The air smelled of engine fumes, sweat, and cheap disinfectant. Kale took Nyari's hand, ignoring the curious looks from passers-by. A massive reptilian dockhand scowled but said nothing, returning to loading crates. They moved into the station's corridors, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Vendors hawked questionable goods, and hustlers lurked in shadows. Nyari pressed close to Kale's side, her tail occasionally brushing the floor or curling protectively behind her. They soon found a lodging kiosk and rented a small bunk room for a few nights. It wasn't luxurious, but it was private, safer than sleeping in some corner of the dock. Once inside, they locked the door and took stock of their situation. We have limited credits, Kale admitted, sinking onto the worn bed. We need a plan to get a real ship or find steady work. Nyari stood near a small console, scanning the station's local net for job listings. The market is flooded with mercenary requests and salvage runs, she said. Most pay a pittance. Kale shrugged. It's better than nothing. Maybe we can take a short job to earn enough for a better place, then figure out the rest. She gave a non-committal hum. I prefer not to become a mercenary. Me neither, but we might not have a choice if we want off this station. She closed the console. I'm tired. Let's rest first. We can decide tomorrow. He nodded, stretching out. His mind churned with half-formed ideas. Maybe he could sell some of the salvage they'd taken from the shuttle. Maybe he could fix up a derelict hull and make it flight-worthy. But all that would take time and resources. For now, he had Nyari, and that thought steadied him. As they settled on the bed, she curled into his side, luminous patterns shifting in a lazy dance across her skin. You're worried, she said softly. I can feel it. He kissed her temple. Just thinking about our future. She exhaled, her breath warm against his chest. We'll figure it out. We always do. Her confidence soothed him, and he let the fatigue drag him under. They slept entwined, the hume of station life a dull roar outside their thin walls. When Kale woke, the station's artificial morning cycle had begun. Vendors would be open, job boards refreshed. They ate a meager breakfast from the station's ration dispensers, then ventured out together, determined to find an opportunity. The main concourse teemed with beings from all over the sector, a kaleidoscope of alien forms and voices. Nyari drew stares wherever she went, some out of fascination, others more predatory. She ignored them, shoulders set. Kale navigated them to a bulletin board featuring digital postings for work. Hauling cargo, escort duties, salvage retrieval, he read. He frowned at the meager pay rates. Not great, Nyari crossed her arms. That one, she said, pointing to an escort request. Pays moderately well. Requires a pilot and a guard to protect a small transport. Kale tapped the listing. Leaving in 2 days. The route passes near a region of pirate activity. That's why it pays more. Could be dangerous. She shrugged. We've faced worse. He couldn't argue. All right, let's see who posted it. They tracked down the contact, a grizzled old starfarer named Thorn, who sat at a dilapidated cafe, sipping something that smelled like stale coffee and motor oil. Thorn eyed Nyari with mild interest. Your partner, eh? She can handle a blaster? Nyari snorted. Better than you. Thorn laughed, revealing metal teeth. I like your spirit. Job's simple enough. Protect my cargo vessel from station to outpost. If pirates show, you keep them off us until we jump. You get paid half up front, half on delivery. Kale considered. We'll need some gear. Weapons and suits. Thorn shrugged. There's a shop down the corridor. I'll front you a small advance if you sign the contract. Kale and Nyari exchanged a glance, silently agreeing. Thorn handed over a battered tablet. Kale read the contract, found it straightforward enough, and signed. Thorn nodded. Welcome aboard. With the advance in hand, Kale and Nyari purchased a pair of used energy pistols, some basic armor plating, and a few supplies. When they returned to their bunk room, Kale sank onto the bed with a sigh. It's not glamorous, but it's a start. Nyari laid the armor plating out, examining it. We'll have enough to get a real ship if we do a few jobs like this. Then we won't be at anyone's mercy, Kale said. She nodded, her tail flicking. I could get used to that. There was a renewed energy between them, a sense of purpose. They spent the next day preparing. Kale made sure the cargo vessel's flight logs were in order, and Nyari tested her gear, ensuring she could move freely with her tail. That night, they found themselves alone in the bunk room again, the hue of station lights flickering overhead. Kale turned off the harsh overhead beam, leaving them in semi-darkness. Nyari's markings glowed softly, painting her in ethereal hues of purple and blue. She stepped closer, a teasing smile on her lips. Still remember my tail? He grinned, resting a hand on her waist. Hard to forget. She guided his other hand to the base of her spine. Inspect it again, if you like. His heart fluttered with anticipation. I'd like that very much. Their lips met. In that instant, all worry about tomorrow's job faded. She pressed against him, warmth flooding his senses. There was a tenderness in the way she touched him now, a familiarity built on trust and shared danger. He explored her scales anew, rediscovering each ridge and crease. She sighed into his mouth, her purr resonating deep in her throat, enveloping them in its gentle vibration. He whispered her name, Nari, like a prayer. She answered by tugging him onto the narrow bed, tail coiling around his thigh as they lost themselves in each other. Once again. In the afterglow, she traced lazy patterns on his chest with her fingertips. He gazed at her, enthralled by the shifting lights of her markings. I never thought. He paused, trying to find the words. Never thought I'd find someone like you. She tilted her head. Someone so alien. Someone who makes me feel alive. Someone who sees me, not just as a tool or a means to an end. She pressed a palm to his cheek. You saved me from a fate worse than exile. I won't forget that. He kissed her fingertips. I just hope we can forge something lasting. This station, these jobs, it's all temporary. She nodded, understanding. We'll find a path. Together. The next day, they met Thorn at the docking bay for the cargo vessel, a battered freighter named the Obsidian Wing. Thorn introduced them to a handful of other hired guards, rough-looking types who eyed Nari warily but kept their distance. Kale took the co-pilot's seat while Nyari handled the forward gun turret. The plan was simple. Jump from Sola's gate to a midpoint station, refuel, then jump to the final outpost. Piracy was common in the region, but Thorn believed the cargo, medical supplies, would be worth the risk. The freighter rumbled to life, and soon they were slipping out of the station's gravity well. Kale guided them onto the pre-plotted course, double-checking nav calibrations. Nyari's voice crackled over the comm from the turret station. All clear so far. No sign of pursuit. Thorn grunted from the captain's chair, sipping from a metal mug. Just wait. Pirates usually lurk at the second jump. Kale exchanged a glance with Thorn, then checked the scanners. For now, the emptiness of space surrounded them. The first jump was uneventful. They emerged near a small fueling depot. Thorn paid a nominal fee to top up the tanks, and the crew took a short break. Nyari stretched her legs in the corridor. Kale watched her, feeling a twinge of pride at how poised she looked. How unwavering. A few of the other guards gave them curious glances, but none dared approach. After fueling, they set off again, preparing for the final jump. Thorn frowned at the readouts. This is where it gets hairy. Keep your eyes open. Kale swallowed, tension coiling in his stomach. He signaled Nari. Gun turret ready? Ready, came her curt reply. Let's get it done. They jumped, the freighter tearing through hyperspace in a swirl of distorted light. Moments later, they emerged near the outpost system, and a cluster of ships flashed on the scanner, blocking their path. Pirates! Thorn barked, slamming his mug down. Multiple fighters closing in. Alarms blared. Kale's hands flew over the console. I'll try evasive maneuvers. Nyari's voice crackled. Targeting the nearest fighter. Firing. The freighter shuddered as the turret unleashed energy blasts, lancing toward the attacking vessels. Return fire raked the hull, making the lights flicker. Thorn cursed, slamming the controls for the shields. Brace yourselves. Kale clenched his jaw, guiding the lumbering freighter in a spiral to avoid the worst of the barrage. The smaller pirate ships were nimble, darting in and out. We can't outrun them in this rust bucket, Kale muttered. Niari, take out their lead fighter. Working on it, she growled. Another volley shot from the turret. One of the pirate ships exploded in a flash of debris. The rest scattered, regrouping for another pass. Thorn yelled for the other guards to seal the cargo hold in case of boarding attempts. Kale watched the sensors. They're trying to flank us. Port side. Niari pivoted the turret, letting loose a hail of plasma. A second fighter took heavy damage, spinning away. The remaining two hammered the freighter with laser fire. Shields at 30%, Thorn warned. If we take another direct hit to the engines, we're done. Kale fought the controls, adrenaline surging. We need to break through and jump again, but the drive's on cooldown. We have a minute before it's ready, Thorn spat. Buy me that minute. Kale's mind raced. Niari, cover me. I'm going to jettison some cargo as a distraction. Thorn's eyes bulged. That's valuable medical? Kale ignored him, activating the release on a few crates. They spilled out into space behind them. The pirates swerved, uncertain. Niari capitalized, blasting one from behind. The resulting explosion rocked the area. Fighter, down, she barked triumphantly. The last pirate vessel swung around for a desperate final attack, ramming them from the side. The freighter's hull screeched. Kale cursed, stabilizing the ship. Nay, he shouted. She locked onto the aggressor, firing relentlessly until the pirate's engines flared. In a burst of flame, the final fighter disintegrated. We're clear, she said, breathing. Sir? Thorn whooped, though his celebration was short-lived as the console lit with damage reports. Hull's compromised in a couple spots, but we can still fly. Kale let out a shaky breath. Jump drive is back online, plotting a course to the outpost. Thorn scowled. Do it. The freighter lurched into hyperspace, leaving the debris of pirate vessels behind. Kale sank back in the seat, heart pounding. They'd survived. Again. Minutes later, they emerged at the final destination, a small station orbiting a dusty planet. The job was done, albeit with more damage than Thorn would have liked. Still, the medical supplies that remained intact would fetch a good price. Thorn grumbled about losing cargo in the jettison maneuver, but he couldn't deny that Kale and Niari had saved them. He paid them the promised sum. As they stood on the docking platform, Kale pocketed the credits, feeling the weight of it in his hand. This'll buy us a chance at a better ship, he said to Niari. She studied him with a faint glow in her eyes. And a chance at freedom. Thorn stomped over, giving them a final once-over. You two did all right. If you're ever in need of work, look me up. Niari gave him a curt nod. We'll keep that in mind. He ambled off, leaving them alone among the bustle of the station. Kale turned to her, a rush of relief flooding him. We did it! Again! She brushed back a stray lock of her dark hair. We make a good team. He clasped her hand, ignoring the stares of passing workers. So, where to now? She tilted her head, tail curling around his leg. We find a ship, chart a course. We see if there's any rumor of my people. Or we chase salvage jobs that pay well. Yeah, he smiled. I like the sound of all of that. She leaned in, pressing her forehead to his. As long as we're together. Her luminous markings glowed with a soft, content radiance. A reflection of the bond they'd forged through fire, desert heat, sabotage, and stolen kisses. He closed his eyes, savoring the feel of her breath. We're together, he promised, meaning every word. They left the docking platform hand in hand, stepping into the unknown, with hearts that beat in unison. Wherever they went, the memory of that first tail inspection and the purring that never quite stopped remained a testament to the strange, beautiful union between a wandering human pilot and the fierce, glowing alien woman who had captured his soul.